The rain started just after midnight. Daniel Harper tightened his grip on the steering wheel as sheets of water slammed against his windshield. The road ahead twisted through miles of empty forest, illuminated only by his flickering headlights. His GPS had lost signal nearly 20 minutes ago, leaving him stranded on a forgotten highway somewhere in northern Oregon. He hated driving in storms. But missing tomorrow morning's job interview wasn't an option. After months of unemployment, this opportunity could change everything. A loud crack of thunder shook the sky. Daniel flinched. His tires skidded slightly on the slick asphalt before stabilizing again. He exhaled slowly, trying to steady his nerves. "Just find a motel," he muttered to himself. As if responding to his plea, a dim neon sign suddenly appeared ahead through the heavy rain. Vacancy. The sign flickered erratically, casting weak pink light onto a narrow gravel driveway leading toward a large, shadowy building. Relief washed over Daniel. He turned his car into the driveway, tires crunching against loose stones. The hotel looked ancient, 3 floors tall, built in a style that might have been elegant decades ago but now felt abandoned by time itself. The name on the building read, "The Briarwood Grand Hotel." Several letters on the sign were missing, leaving dark gaps in the title. One of the windows on the second floor was shattered, covered with plastic sheeting that flapped violently in the wind. Daniel hesitated. The place didn't look open. But the neon vacancy sign continued flickering. And he was exhausted. He parked near the entrance and stepped out into the storm, instantly soaked by cold rain. Thunder rolled overhead as he hurried inside through heavy glass doors. The lobby smelled faintly of mildew and something older, like dust trapped for decades. A large chandelier hung from the ceiling, but only 2 bulbs worked, casting weak golden light across faded carpets. The furniture looked expensive yet neglected, covered in subtle layers of grime. Behind the front desk stood an elderly woman. She appeared so suddenly Daniel almost jumped. She wore a dark gray uniform, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun. Her face was pale, with sharp cheekbones and tired eyes that seemed unusually still. "Good evening," she said softly. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. Daniel forced a polite smile. "Hi, do you have any rooms available?" She stared at him for a few seconds before responding. "Yes, we always have rooms available." Something about the way she said it made Daniel uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. "Just for one night, of course." She reached below the desk and pulled out a thick, leather-bound guest book. The pages looked yellowed and brittle. "Please sign." Daniel leaned forward and scanned the entries above his name. His stomach tightened. The dates written beside the names stretched back years, decades even. Some entries looked fresh, but others were faded as if written long ago. Oddly, there were very few names overall. He shrugged it off and signed anyway. "Room 407, she said, sliding an old brass key across the counter. Daniel noticed there were no electronic key cards, just a heavy key attached to a metal tag engraved with 407. "Elevator is down the hall," she added. He picked up the key. "Thank you." As he turned to leave, she spoke again. "Sir." He looked back. "Do not leave your room after midnight." Daniel frowned slightly. "Why?" The woman smiled faintly. "Hotel policy." The elevator creaked loudly as it carried him to the 4th floor. The lights inside flickered with each jerking movement, and Daniel wondered how this place hadn't failed basic safety inspections. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped into a long, narrow hallway. The corridor was eerily silent. Dim wall lamps cast long shadows across faded wallpaper patterned with dark red vines. The carpet muffled his footsteps completely, making the hallway feel unnaturally still. Room numbers were mounted on brass plaques beside each door. 401, 403, 405. Daniel paused. The numbering skipped strangely, with several rooms missing entirely. Some doors looked sealed shut with old wooden boards nailed across them. He continued walking until he reached the final door at the far end. 407. The hallway light above the door flickered repeatedly, buzzing faintly. Daniel inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked open with surprising smoothness. He pushed the door inside. The room was unexpectedly beautiful. A large king-sized bed sat in the center, covered with crisp white sheets. Vintage lamps glowed warmly on either side. A tall window overlooked the stormy forest, rain streaking against the glass. There was even a small fireplace crackling gently in the corner. Daniel blinked in surprise. Okay. Not bad, he whispered. He placed his suitcase near the bed and checked the bathroom. It was spotless, lined with marble tiles and polished fixtures that looked far newer than anything else in the hotel. Maybe the outside appearance was just misleading, he thought. After a quick shower, Daniel collapsed onto the bed. The mattress was incredibly soft, and exhaustion quickly pulled at his eyelids. He checked his phone. No signal. He sighed and set it on the nightstand. The digital clock beside the bed read 11:47 p.m. Within minutes, he drifted into sleep. Daniel woke suddenly. The room was dark. The fireplace had burned out, leaving only faint orange embers glowing among ashes. The air felt colder now. He glanced at the clock. 12:16 a.m. A strange sound echoed faintly through the walls. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps. Daniel sat upright, listening carefully. The steps moved through the hallway outside his room, uneven and deliberate, like someone limping across the carpet. He remembered the receptionist's warning. Do not leave your room after midnight. He swallowed hard, trying to convince himself it was just another guest. The footsteps stopped outside his door. Silence followed. Then, a soft scratching sound began. Daniel's breath caught. The scratching moved slowly across the door surface, like fingernails dragging along wood. It continued for several seconds before stopping abruptly. He waited. Nothing. After nearly a minute, he forced himself to stand and approach the door cautiously. Hello, he called. No response. His hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling slightly. Curiosity overcame fear. He twisted the knob and pulled the door open. The hallway was empty. The lamps flickered weakly, casting uneven shadows across the corridor. The air felt colder than before. Daniel stepped outside, scanning both directions. Hello, he repeated. Still nothing. Then he noticed something strange. Across the hallway, directly opposite his room, there was another door. It was labeled 409. Daniel frowned. He was certain that room hadn't been there earlier. He distinctly remembered 407 being the final door at the hallway's end. The door to 409 looked different from the others. Its wood was darker, almost black, and the brass number plate looked older, tarnished by time. As Daniel stared at it, he felt an overwhelming urge to approach. He told himself it was ridiculous. Yet his feet moved forward anyway. Each step felt heavier than the last. When he reached the door, he noticed it was slightly open. A narrow crack revealed darkness inside. Hello, he whispered, pushing gently. The door creaked open wider. The room inside was completely dark, except for a faint glow coming from what looked like an old television sitting on a dresser across the room. Static filled the screen. Daniel stepped inside. The air smelled stale, like the room had been sealed for years. Is someone here? He asked. The television crackled louder. Then the static shifted. Shapes began forming within the white noise, blurry silhouettes moving slowly across the screen. Daniel leaned closer, squinting. The shapes began resembling people. Standing, watching. His heart pounded. Suddenly, the television emitted a sharp burst of distorted sound, and the silhouettes turned toward him simultaneously. The screen went black. Behind him, the door slammed shut. Daniel spun around, panic rising in his chest. He grabbed the handle and tried pulling it open. It wouldn't move. Hello. His voice echoed strangely through the room, sounding slightly delayed, as if the walls were repeating his words back to him. He turned around again. The television had turned back on by itself. Now it showed a grainy black and white image. Daniel froze. The image displayed the hotel lobby. The front desk. The elderly receptionist standing motionless behind it. She slowly lifted her head and stared directly into the camera. Or, at him. Her lips moved silently. Daniel stepped closer, heart racing. Suddenly, the audio crackled alive. You should not be here. Daniel stumbled backward. The screen flickered violently, distorting her face into twisted, unnatural shapes before cutting to static again. The room temperature dropped sharply. Daniel's breath became visible in the freezing air. From somewhere behind him, a whisper emerged. Room 409. Does not let guests leave. Daniel spun around. No one was there, but the whisper repeated, louder this time, echoing from every corner of the room. Room 409. Does not let guests leave. The television exploded into blinding white light. Daniel screamed and rushed toward the door again, pulling desperately. This time, the handle turned. The door flew open. He stumbled back into the hallway, gasping for breath. The corridor lights flickered violently before stabilizing. Daniel turned back toward the door behind him. Room 409 was gone. Only a blank wall stood where it had been. He stared in disbelief. Slowly, he stepped backward until his shoulders hit his own room door. His hands trembled as he unlocked 407 and rushed inside, slamming it shut behind him. He leaned against the door, breathing heavily. "This isn't real," he whispered. "This isn't real." From the nightstand, the digital clock glowed faintly. 12:47 a.m. Daniel forced himself to sit on the bed, trying to steady his shaking hands. Then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The mirror across the room reflected the doorway behind him. And in that reflection, someone stood just outside his room. Tall, unmoving, watching through the narrow gap beneath the door. Daniel turned slowly toward the door as the shadow outside shifted slightly, as if it had been waiting for him to notice. Daniel stared at the shadow beneath his door. It stretched across the thin strip of light from the hallway, unmoving, patient, as if whoever stood outside knew he was watching. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Slowly, he stood from the bed, his legs trembling beneath him. Every instinct screamed at him to stay away from the door. But curiosity and fear pulled him closer at the same time. The shadow shifted slightly. Daniel froze. A faint scraping sound echoed across the hallway, like something dragging along the carpet. The shadow moved sideways, gliding past his door until it vanished completely. Silence followed. Daniel waited, holding his breath, counting each second as it crawled by. After nearly 2 minutes, he leaned down and cautiously pressed his ear against the door. Nothing. No footsteps. No breathing. Just silence. He stepped back, wiping sweat from his forehead. His mind raced, searching for logical explanations. Maybe it was another guest. Maybe the strange room was just a nightmare. He looked toward the mirror again. Nothing stood there now. Daniel exhaled slowly and checked the clock. 1:02 a.m. He needed sleep. He needed to think clearly before morning. Tomorrow he would leave this place and forget it ever existed. He climbed back into bed, pulling the blanket tightly around himself. The storm outside had worsened, thunder rumbling like distant explosions. Rain hammered against the window, rattling the glass violently. Daniel closed his eyes. Minutes passed. Then, a knock echoed from inside the room. Daniel's eyes snapped open. The sound hadn't come from the door. It came from the wall beside the bed. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel sat upright, staring at the wall. The knocking repeated, slightly louder this time, as if someone was trapped inside the plaster trying to get out. "No," he whispered, backing away. The wallpaper began to ripple slightly, like something was moving beneath it. The knocking grew frantic. Suddenly, it stopped. Complete silence filled the room once more. Daniel grabbed his phone and tried turning on the flashlight. The battery icon flashed red, 1% remaining, before the screen went black. "Great," he muttered, panic rising again. The bedside lamp flickered violently before dimming to a weak glow. The room felt darker than before, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. Then he noticed something that made his stomach twist. The hotel room door was slightly open. Daniel was certain he had locked it. He stared at the narrow crack, heart pounding, expecting something to push its way through. Instead, a folded piece of paper slowly slid under the door and stopped near the carpet. Daniel hesitated before crawling forward and picking it up. The paper felt damp and cold. He unfolded it carefully. Written in shaky handwriting were 3 words. "Check the closet." Daniel looked toward the large wooden closet near the window. Its doors were shut tightly, but he suddenly felt an intense dread just staring at it. He considered ignoring the message. But curiosity won again. He stood and approached the closet cautiously. Each step felt heavier, like the air itself was resisting him. When he reached the doors, he noticed faint scratches covering the wood surface, long vertical marks like someone had clawed their way out, or tried to. His hand hovered over the handle. "Stop doing this," he whispered to himself. Still, he opened it. Inside the closet hung several hotel robes and extra blankets. At first, everything looked normal. Then Daniel noticed a small door at the back of the closet wall. It blended perfectly with the interior, painted the same color, making it nearly invisible. The door had no handle, only a small circular keyhole. Daniel leaned closer, peering through it. Darkness filled the space beyond. But then, movement. Something shifted in the darkness. Daniel jerked backward, slamming into the closet frame. The small hidden door creaked open slowly on its own, revealing a narrow passageway descending into blackness. Cold air rushed out, carrying a rotten, damp smell. From deep within the passage, faint whispers echoed upward. "Help us!" Daniel's chest tightened. He stared at the staircase leading down, unsure whether he was imagining things or witnessing something real. Suddenly, footsteps thundered down the hallway outside his room, fast, desperate, like someone running for their life. A scream followed, high-pitched, terrified. Daniel rushed out of the closet and ran toward the room door. He flung it open just as the scream echoed again, cutting abruptly into silence. The hallway lights flickered wildly. Daniel looked left, empty. He looked right. At the far end of the corridor stood the elderly receptionist. She was impossibly far from the lobby, and completely still. Her gray uniform looked darker now, almost soaked in shadow. Her face remained pale and emotionless as she stared directly at Daniel. "How did you get up here?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking. She didn't respond. Instead, she slowly raised one hand and pointed toward the closet inside his room. Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. "What's in there?" he demanded. Her lips curved into a thin smile. "That," she said quietly, "is where the missing rooms go." Daniel frowned. "What does that even mean?" She tilted her head slightly, her eyes reflecting the flickering hallway lights. "Room numbers are not removed from this hotel," she whispered. "They are relocated." Before Daniel could respond, the hallway lights suddenly shut off. Darkness swallowed everything. Daniel gasped, stumbling backward into his room. The door slammed shut by itself, locking with a loud metallic click. The lights inside his room flickered violently before stabilizing. Daniel rushed toward the closet again. The hidden door inside now stood fully open. The whispers coming from the passage had grown louder. "Daniel," he froze. "They know my name," he whispered, horrified. The whispers repeated it again. Dozens of voices layered together, calling him deeper into the darkness. The room temperature dropped rapidly. Frost began forming along the edges of the mirror and window. Behind him, the television turned on again without warning. Daniel turned slowly toward it. This time, the screen showed security footage from inside the hotel corridors, grainy black and white images shifting between different floors. He watched as the footage displayed guests walking through hallways, entering rooms, disappearing. One clip froze his blood. The screen showed Daniel arriving earlier that night, signing the guest book in the lobby. But something was wrong. Standing directly behind him in the footage, was a tall figure in dark clothing. Its face was blurred beyond recognition, its head slightly tilted as it watched Daniel sign his name. Daniel stumbled backward, his legs nearly giving out. The television switched footage again. Now it displayed dozens of people trapped inside narrow corridors, pounding against invisible walls, screaming silently while shadows crawled across ceilings and floors around them. A message appeared across the screen in flickering letters. "Every guest stays forever." Daniel screamed and grabbed a nearby lamp, hurling it at the television. The screen shattered into sparks and smoke, plunging half the room into darkness again. Behind him, the closet door slammed shut. Daniel spun around in panic and rushed toward it, pulling it open again. The hidden passage was gone. Only a solid wall remained. "No, no, no," he whispered, backing away. Suddenly, the phone on the nightstand began ringing. Daniel stared at it, terrified. The hotel phone hadn't been there before. It rang again, and again. With shaking hands, Daniel slowly picked up the receiver. "Hello." Static crackled through the line. Then the receptionist's voice whispered softly, "You entered room 409. Daniel swallowed hard. It disappeared. Her voice became colder. "It never disappears. It only moves. What do you want from me?" he shouted. Silence lingered for several seconds. Then she replied, "The hotel chooses its guests carefully. The call ended. Daniel slowly lowered the receiver. Behind him, the mirror across the room began fogging over, as if someone was breathing directly onto its surface from the other side. Letters slowly formed in the condensation. You checked in. The message changed. You can never check out. Daniel backed toward the window, shaking uncontrollably. Rain pounded against the glass harder than ever, lightning flashing through the stormy forest outside. He turned toward the door, desperate to escape. The doorknob began twisting slowly by itself. Someone, or something, was trying to enter. The lock clicked open. The door creaked inward. Daniel held his breath as the hallway darkness spilled into the room, and the silhouette of the tall figure stepped across the threshold. The silhouette stepped inside room 407. Daniel staggered backward until his legs hit the edge of the bed. The hallway darkness seemed to cling to the figure like living smoke, hiding every detail except its height. Tall, unnaturally tall, with shoulders that nearly touched the doorframe. The door slowly shut behind it. Click. Locked. Daniel's breathing turned shallow as he searched for any sign of a face, but the darkness covering the figure twisted and shifted constantly, like shadows crawling over skin. Stay back, Daniel whispered. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it moved forward with slow, deliberate steps. Each footstep made the floor creak as if the hotel itself recognized its presence. Daniel grabbed a glass bottle from the nightstand and held it defensively. What do you want from me? The figure stopped halfway across the room. Then, it spoke. Its voice sounded layered, as if dozens of people were speaking at once from inside its chest. You signed the book. Daniel's stomach dropped. I just needed a room. He shouted. There are no temporary guests here. The room lights flickered violently. The walls trembled slightly, and Daniel noticed the wallpaper beginning to peel away in long strips, revealing something beneath it. Names. Hundreds of names carved directly into the wall. Daniel stared in horror as he saw dates written beside them, some recent, others stretching back nearly a century. You are part of the hotel now, the figure continued. No. Daniel shook his head. There has to be a way out. The figure slowly raised one long arm and pointed toward the closet. The exit has always been there. Daniel's mind flashed back to the hidden staircase. His heart pounded as he realized what the receptionist meant. The missing rooms, he whispered. The figure nodded slightly. They are the hotel's foundation. Suddenly, loud banging erupted from inside the walls again, stronger than before. The carved names began cracking, dust falling onto the carpet as muffled screams echoed behind the plaster. Daniel covered his ears. Who are they? He asked. They are guests who tried to leave. Daniel stared at the shadowed figure, disbelief turning into fury. You trapped them. They trapped themselves, the voice replied coldly. Every guest signs willingly. Daniel clenched his fists. I didn't know. Knowledge is not required. The figure stepped closer, and Daniel felt the air around him grow freezing cold. Frost spread across the bed frame and windows, creeping slowly toward him. You have one choice left, it said. Daniel swallowed hard. What choice? The figure pointed toward the closet again. Descend. The closet doors burst open by themselves. The hidden staircase reappeared, stretching downward into endless darkness. The whispers returned instantly, louder than ever. Join us. Help us. Don't leave us alone. Daniel stepped back, shaking violently. His instincts told him the staircase was a trap, but it was also the only escape offered. What happens if I don't go? He asked. The figure tilted its head. You remain in room 407 forever. The walls suddenly shifted slightly, and Daniel felt the floor vibrate beneath him. He turned toward the window and saw something that made his blood run cold. The forest outside was gone. Instead, endless rows of hotel windows stretched into darkness in every direction, as if the building existed inside an infinite structure. Daniel stumbled backward. This place isn't real, he whispered. The figure responded calmly. The hotel exists between places, between time. Daniel's mind raced. He thought about his interview, his apartment, his normal life, things that now felt impossibly distant. Has anyone escaped? He asked. For the first time, the figure hesitated. It admitted. Daniel's heart jumped. How? They refused to sign their full name. Daniel froze. I signed my name completely. Yes. Daniel's hope collapsed instantly. But then he remembered something. When he signed the guest book, his pen had briefly run out of ink. He had scribbled over the last letter of his surname to make it visible. He slowly looked up at the figure. What happens if the signature isn't complete? He asked carefully. The shadows covering the figure twitched violently, as if disturbed. The contract weakens, it answered. Daniel felt a spark of hope ignite inside his chest. Without warning, he sprinted toward the desk across the room where the guest key tag rested. He grabbed the metal tag and smashed it against the mirror. Glass shattered everywhere. The reflection fractured into dozens of broken pieces, each showing distorted versions of Daniel standing inside different rooms, some trapped behind walls, some screaming silently. Behind those reflections, he saw the receptionist standing in each shard. Watching, smiling. "You cannot break your stay," her voice echoed from every reflection simultaneously. Daniel ignored her and rushed toward the closet staircase. The figure lunged forward suddenly, shadows stretching across the floor like grasping hands. "You must descend," it roared. Daniel jumped onto the staircase, nearly slipping as he raced downward into darkness. The passage twisted deeper underground, walls narrowing around him. The whispers turned into screams, echoing louder with every step. After what felt like endless descent, Daniel reached a massive underground hallway. Doors lined both sides, hundreds of them. Each door had missing room numbers carved into rusted metal plates. Room 102, Room 214, Room 309, and finally, Room 409. The door stood slightly open, leaking faint white light. Daniel approached slowly, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Inside, he could hear people crying softly. He pushed the door open. The room was enormous, far larger than physically possible. Dozens of trapped guests stood inside, their bodies pale, their eyes hollow with exhaustion. Some were transparent, flickering like broken memories. They all turned toward Daniel simultaneously. "You came back," one woman whispered. I don't belong here," Daniel replied. "No one does," an old man said quietly. Daniel noticed a massive guest book resting on a pedestal in the center of the room. Its pages flipped slowly by themselves, revealing endless signatures. "Destroy it," the woman begged. Daniel stepped closer. The pages displayed every name carved into the hotel walls. He searched desperately until he found his own signature. It was smeared, incomplete. Hope surged through him. He grabbed the book and tried tearing the page out. The entire room began shaking violently. From the hallway behind him, the shadow figure roared with rage. Darkness poured through the doorway like flooding smoke. "You cannot undo your stay," it thundered. Daniel screamed and ripped the page out anyway. The moment the paper tore free, blinding light erupted across the room. The trapped guests began dissolving into glowing mist, their expressions turning peaceful as they faded away one by one. The hallway collapsed around Daniel, walls cracking and shattering like glass. The shadow figure lunged toward him, stretching its arms across impossible distance. "You belong to the hotel." Daniel clutched the torn page tightly as the ground beneath him vanished. He woke up lying on wet asphalt. Morning sunlight burned his eyes. Daniel gasped and sat up, coughing rainwater from his lungs. He looked around and saw his car parked beside him, on an empty forest road. No hotel, no driveway, nothing but trees and silence. His phone buzzed suddenly. He grabbed it and saw a notification for his job interview, scheduled in 1 hour. Daniel laughed weakly, overwhelmed with relief. Then he noticed something still clutched in his hand. The torn guestbook page. His incomplete signature remained on it. But beneath his name, new letters slowly began writing themselves in invisible ink. Room 410 reserved. Daniel's smile faded as the forest around him grew strangely quiet, and far away, hidden among the trees, a faint neon sign flickered once more. Vacancy.